Welcome back to part 2 of solving two-step inequalities. I think we stopped right here. Let's get started. Okay, again, we have to be able to work with all different types of rational numbers, integers, decimals, as well as fractions. So let's solve this inequality and give the solution or graph the solution set. Okay, so please notice here that our coefficient again is a -1, and that will in fact affect how our answer turns out. So we're going to subtract 1/3 from both sides. 4/3 minus 1/3 is 4, and 4 is greater than 4 is greater than the opposite of x. So how do we get this? Well, we ended up dividing both sides by a -1. And when we divide it by a -1, it caused us to have to switch our inequality. So -4 is less than x. And again, that's the same thing as saying x is greater than -4. If that makes it easier for you. Not including -4, so you have to put a circle around it, and everything greater than -4. Okay, so next few we're not going to graph, we're just going to solve them. Number 3, we subtract 1 5/10 from both sides. Make sure you line up your decimals so that we don't make any silly mistakes there. So I have to divide both sides by a positive 5/10, so there shouldn't be any switching on this one. So x is greater than or equal to 5. It's hard for me to read that backwards. So it's also the same thing as this. You can say it both ways, but it's easier when you graph them to turn it around. All right, number 4. Again, we have a negative coefficient here, so be careful with your final answer. Subtract 10 from both sides. And we have to remember our integer rules. -3/4 x is greater than or equal to -18, or -18 is less than or equal to -3/4 x. We have a negative coefficient. So we want to multiply by the multiplicative inverse, which is -4/3. That will get x by itself. But because we're multiplying, simplify before we multiply on the left-hand side. We're dividing, we're going to simplify 3 and 18. Remember to keep your negative sign here. So that's a -4 times a -6. Gives us a positive 24. Why do we switch the sign? Well, because we multiply both sides by a negative number, -4/3. So our sign inequality sign had to switch. Give you plenty of practice with these negative coefficients. So in number 5, we have a coefficient is -1. We're going to subtract 2500 from both sides. I add a couple of zeros so I can subtract my we're adding 2500 to both sides. Add a couple of zeros, line up my decimal on the right-hand side. So I'm left with the opposite of t is greater than -7500. Remember, my coefficient is -1. So if I'm dividing by a negative number when solving inequalities, I have to switch my inequality sign. That gives me t is less than 7500. Okay, we should be able to squeeze one in, but we can't finish this. It's okay, it's good practice. So first thing I'm going to notice here is that my coefficient again is negative, which means what? I need to switch my sign eventually. All right, I'm going to subtract 1 5/10 from both sides. A negative plus a negative is negative. Now I'm dividing both sides by a negative 1 75/100, which means my sign switched. My inequality sign switched. A negative divided by a negative gives me a positive 2. All right, we're at 5 minutes. So I believe we should better wrap this up when we come back.